Hello there. Welcome to episode 13 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by medievalists.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and the questions we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
And I'm Kelly DeVries. I am professor of history at Loyola University in Maryland, and luckily, the ending of a term of a department chair. You don't want
Well
no
done.
hell. Want no hell, Mike. Being
A,
department chair in a pandemic year, my God.
it's
I'd rather go fight at Courtrai. I really would.
Yeah, it's survival, man. It's survival,
Absolutely.
and you
Yeah,
made it through.
I made it through.
Yeah, Kelly went where nobody wants to go, and took
Yeah.
one for the team. I'm sure they're all happy for you.
Yeah, except for the dean. I made his life hell. So there's another win.
There's another win. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Well done, sir. Well done. Yeah. So look, folks, we are on Lucky 13.
Yeah, can you believe it? Number 13.
Which means there's just one episode between us now and our next Q&A. So you need to get in those questions for episode 15, which will be another Q&A with these two numbskulls here about your questions on medieval warfare. You can throw those questions at the Patreon page of medievalists.net, which is a great place to support what we're doing. Send it to us. You can email either of us. For our emails are public domain. Hit us up on social media. Ransack my Twitter. Ask us questions. Like get us things to talk about. We love it. So get those questions in, people. Chop chop.
Yeah. In fact, I got one the other day. A student who was asking, I don't know if he was asking for this so much as just, one of the requests I get. And so I wrote him and said, yeah, I'm going to do this question on the podcast. So I'll leave everybody hanging. It's a
All
good
right.
question.
I don't even know what the question is. Oh boy.
No,
Very exciting. Very exciting. As Kelly hinted at there, we are going to do the Battle of Courtrai today.
Golden Spurs.
The Golden Spurs. It's happening today. What are you drinking for the occasion, my friend?
Well, we could go with a French wine, but as the French got trounced in this battle, the wine would probably be bad. It'd be vinegary. So I think I've got to go with a Belgian delicacy, and I'm thinking maybe Creek.
Oh, good stuff.
Cherry flavored beer.
Yeah.
Creek, but I'm on a bar in Belgium, so the only thing that you've got going, at a bar in Belgium is I'm going to have Frieten as well. So we're gonna have a meal here to at least these amazing French fries, Belgian fries.
They're not French fries. Yeah, they're
They're
Frieten,
not
man.
French fries. They are Belgian fries, and they go amazingly well with a dollop of mayonnaise and a cherry wheat beer.
Warm mayonnaise.
Or mayonnaise, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. God, you're making me miss the Low Countries. Oh man, we're gonna have talking about Low Countries today. Low Countries are awesome. I can't in just a few weeks, I'm actually going to be in Hent. Oh my God, it's gonna be great. Yeah, it's a creek. Good stuff, man. It's hard to find a good creek, here in the States.
I've tried. They always give me a really sour beer, and
Yeah.
the ones we've had you're speaking about Ghent. I mean, we had a amazing creek beer there with our buddy Bob Boozman Savage,
I
and
forgot about that.
and right looking down at the statue of Jacob van Artevelde, who comes up after the Battle of Courtrai, certainly. But that amazing meal we had right there at that square, and then that creek beer was to die for.
It was so good. I don't remember what oh man, it was amazing. It was so good. I'm gonna just pop a local wheat here. A good Belgian wheat beer. Because you got the creek. I'll go with the regular.
Yeah, you'll be the second round. You'll go with creek.
I'll go find it. I'll find a Trappist and see what he's brewing up.
Yeah. You wonder how some guy I can imagine, the Belgians, wheat, all the Trappist monks, everybody making these with and somebody has like a bunch of cherries and throws it in or drops in by mistake, and they create the Creek beer.
Whoa! Look what we did.
'Cause we had great Creek. I mean, Saint Omer, we had great Creek beer. We had great Creek beer in Ypres, if you remember.
Yeah, no, that trip. I think we had a creek everywhere. We were just like, we're like, all right, well, let's have one here.
Yeah,
And then
that
other
was
things might have been had after that, but I do
yeah.
think
No,
just about
I've
every
tried
place.
them. I've tried to find them here, and they all look very sour, and I don't like sour creek.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, so
Well,
that's a,
so yeah,
and I'm
we're gonna be
sure
doing
that
we're gonna
what
be doing
the
some low country stuff here. Battle of Golden Spurs is, I mean, it's the Battle of Courtrai. I like calling it Golden Spurs.
yeah,
It just sounds so cool. Sounds amazing to call it that. This is 1302, the 11th of July, in fact, 1302. But obviously, we don't usually start there. We start
we're gonna
before.
start early.
Yeah.
In fact, we're gonna start in my lifetime because I got to tell you, Battle of Courtrai has a special part of my soul.
You
Uh,
fought there, Kelly?
I fought there. I must have. I actually fought there 700 years after the battle. I was at the
Oh, yeah.
700th anniversary of the Battle of Courtrai. I left the Leeds conference, flew over, and went to that, and it was amazing. And in fact, they discovered I was there, and I had done this translation of an edition of the a book by the great Jan Frans Verbruggen
Mhm.
on the Battle of Courtrai, and it was part of my bucket list for the one I thought I might not make. When I was young, 1921, I've said this before, I think I was on a mission, Mormon mission in Belgium. I didn't like the Mormon mission, but I loved Belgium. And I read a book called Fair Face of Flanders by Patricia. No, no, I'm forgetting. No, I'm forgetting her name. Oh no, that's terrible. I'll come back with
For sure.
it.
That's
Gerson, yeah. And it was Fair Face of Flanders had a chapter on Courtrai, and I was reading and I read about the Flemish beating the French, and as an American, we always like the French being beaten. I think as a Belgian, as one who loved the Belgian people, I liked the idea of the underdog, and it was. At that point, I said, I'm going to come back for the 700th anniversary of the battle. This was, 1980, 1976, 78.
1976.
Yeah, so it was around 77.
Do you want to know
Sure
how old I
enough, I
was?
made it. In 2003, I made it. I was there on the
You
back.
don't want to know how old I was.
No, I don't know. I'll do it. I
It
was,
was
I was
Patricia Carson, by the way.
Patricia Carson. That's it.
Yeah.
A great book. She also wrote a great book on Jan Jacob van Artevelde, who is the next rebellion leader. And that's what we're talking about. We go to Low Countries, the 14th, 15th century. You could
There's a
say
rebellion.
the rebel Low Countries, and it's redundant almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There was rebellion after rebellion. The low we should actually define for those people who don't know what the Low Countries are. The Low Countries, well, it's actually kind of hard to define. This is what we now think of as like Belgium, the Netherlands, but actually a little,
Luxembourg.
yeah, Luxembourg, maybe even a touch of Germany. It's right that area,
Yeah,
which is in fact low in altitude, most of it. Not all of it though. There are some hills and stuff that get important in various battles.
yeah,
But yeah, this is the Low Countries, and you can actually see somewhat of a vestige of the fact that this has been a place in tumult over the ages
yeah.
in a country like Belgium,
Yeah.
because Belgium is sort of two countries kind of in one. We love Belgium.
Certainly is. Yeah, certainly
My
is.
wife's stepfather is Belgium. They're amazing. We love the Belgians. Go
Yeah,
Red Devils.
yeah,
But yeah, it's kind of a weird country in a sense because one half of it speaks one language, one half speaks the other language. Now I think that, everybody gets along for the most part. But yeah, this is a country, an area that has long been sort of split between cultural impulses, I guess, political dynamics.
Well, certainly language impulses, and that was kind of defining. I mean, even today, we did this drive. If you remember, we drove from Tournai to Courtrai,
Yeah.
and you can actually see when the signs go so totally French to French, Flemish, French, Dutch, and then totally Dutch within a 20-kilometer stretch of road. It's really quite interesting to do it. Now, to be honest, that this time now, Tournai, which is in the south and has very strong French proclivities, always has. Tournai is speaking French. There's no question. Saint-Omer, though, is still got a dossing of Flemish being spoken there. It had been Saint-Omer and Lille had been part of the county of Flanders, well until really the end of the 12th century, beginning it's after Bouvines that those so 1214. We're gonna have to do the Battle of Bouvines one day.
Ooh, I will.
It's after the Battle of Bouvines that those two places get removed from the county of Flanders. So they're still speaking Flemish, and so the language borders and the cultural borders. It it's funny because when I've been at conferences talked about the rebellions of these lands and the people there, because they are very prosperous too, which is the other thing we have to take into consideration. The towns of Flanders, especially, but some in Hainaut and Brabant as well, and Liège, Prince Bishopric of Liège, all those towns are very, very wealthy. They're wealthy. The principal towns in Flanders we're going to be talking about at the Battle of Courtrai, they're all wealthy on cloth making. So they're getting the wool from England, they're making cloth and doing it in an industrial fashion. They, the northern Italian towns are still a little more wealthy, but there's no other place that even compares with these two for the amount of wealth. So you've got big urban areas that had once been large agricultural expanses that were under, whatever we want to call feudalism, its obligation, agricultural economy, and so forth. And now these towns are huge, and they're all based on cloth making. So they're wealthy too, and with wealth comes a desire for sovereignty, economic sovereignty, we'll say. But every time I'm at a conference and I mention these sort of things, anybody who says, well, you can't be nationalistic, can't be. No, in the Low Countries, I swear there is this regionalism, we'll call it regionalistic. They really do form their own. Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. And neither of these guys write about Battle of Courtrai, but they do write a lot. Jean Lebel in Liège and Jean Froissart out of Valenciennes in Hainaut. And they clearly have a very strong interest in the Low Countries in a way that the French authors at the same time don't. And one of the reasons they get on the side of England in defeating the French is because they're both in areas, they're born in areas that are conflicted with, like you call it, this cultural clash between the French culture and this kind of what we call it, a Flemish culture. I mean, Liège is not; they're speaking French, but
Yeah, I mean, you have the local culture, yeah, the French culture, as you mentioned, but at the same time, you have this economic pull that's drawing you more closely to England.
mhm.
So you have this connection, and then you have well, much of this wealth is coming to kind of a new, almost class structure, which that starts to run afoul of class structures in France, for instance, and how they're doing business, and so all of these sort of competing poles end up sort of fragmenting this region, and then as someone tries to kind of coalesce it, inevitably, right, you've got people wanting to no, I want to be broken apart, and so somebody else comes in and tries to pull it together a different way. So it really is constantly in flux and constantly in a state of a quasi rebellion against kind of something and someone uh, for a long, long time, and it ends up that this culminates, at least one phase of this
Yeah,
culminates with this particular battle. So this particular phase is the Franco-Flemish War. It's often called. Starts around 1297.
Yeah, I mean, and of course with 1297, it started with England too. You have to throw England in there. This is 1297. Edward the First promises the county of Flanders. As you said, the county of Flanders is tied economically directly to England. They get their wool from England. England, uses um, the wool exports to build the wealth of England. Any wealth that England's got. And I always start saying it starts with the sheep.
It's,
Um, you know,
sheep are the backbone of that economy.
the backbone of that economy, and also the cloth making. I mean, we're not talking about making linen. We're not talking about making silk. I mean, there were capabilities of doing both if they had the right tools, but the right resources. But it's wool clothing, and that up to that period in time, up to this period, we're starting to talk about this in the 13th century, both here and in northern Italy. It's cloth has been made, pretty much locally for, you can imagine one little town has one weaver, and one cloth maker, and that's what they do in their spare time. One little village after they've gone plowed their
Yeah.
fields a day. The industrialization of cloth making is really, I won't call it an industrial revolution because, of course, that's got a big, a big connotation later on, but it's the similar thing. They're bringing all the cloth making needs into an urban setting, and so the and so the people of that town are supported by nothing that they produce from the ground up. It's things that they import to produce cloth. And then they have to import food to feed those people
Right.
because they're not growing it. And so the whole of economy in Flanders and in most Low Countries is based on these making of cloth at the time. So England has a vested interest, and Edward the First knows this. Makes some promises in 1297 that he'll come over. He even brings a force over in 1298, and they sit on their asses in Ghent. We've got some fun things there in Ghent about the Ghent people, the Gentois. They're not called Gentinars.
Gentinars, yeah.
Gentinars. Gentinars get pissed off because the English are not doing anything; they're just sitting on their asses, and they have to feed them
Yeah.
and give them beer, which the English seem to like. There's some fisticuffs that go on, shall we say, between the Flemings and the English, and all the time, of course, Edward is stabbing Flanders in the back. My English colleagues don't like hearing that, but he does. He arranges the marriage of Edward II with Philip IV's daughter. Well, all the time when he's supposed to be on the side of Flanders in a great war against France to give them more sovereignty, and then he just says, I'm gone. And
Well,
that's
it's complicated. We'll say that it's complicated.
it. It's
It's
complicated,
complicated. It's
as all
complicated.
relationships are.
And one of those complications is that, as Kelly's saying, this becomes a kind of proxy fight for French and English powers. Even if we're not going to go directly at each other, I mean, they do plenty of that, but we can also use the control over this area as another sort of front in our struggle, right? This is on the channel, so there's a kind of military importance there. There's this enormous economic importance that Kelly's talking about, which is important to the English crown because of all of the money that's being made on this export of wool, but also is integral to the Low Countries. They need to have that in order to keep going. It's one of these you know almost like a kind of mini globalization sort of structure here, in terms of, this good is exported here to have this done to it so that it can be exported there so to have this done to it, right? And throughout this chain, everybody's like, getting a piece of the pie, and it's great when it's all working. But then if, say, I don't know, the French come along and decide that they want to impose tax structures on this area that's in the middle of all of it, the Low Countries, Flanders, we want to do that in order for us to get the money out of that, and
Yeah.
for us to have a way to kind of stick it to the English and screw up their economy. Now the system's not going to work very well. And that's going to probably upset some people. Well, in England, but we're most going to be talking about in the Low Countries,
Yeah.
people who are a little bit pissed off
Oh,
that people would come in, these French would come in and screw up the system we've got in order to try and siphon off money and take control.
yeah. I mean, this is, they've got long memories at this period of time. I think we don't we all think everything flees away one way or another. This has been going on for a whole century as Flanders got, especially County of Flanders, but all of the Low Countries, but the County of Flanders gets wealthier and wealthier. And one of the reasons why there are these towns that grow in Flanders is that they don't have a lot of noble control. The nobility was completely destroyed when Flanders revolts against the French, that ends up in the Battle of Bouvines in 1214, and their Count Ferrand of Portugal goes into a French imprisonment for 20 years or so, and his wife, who is the Countess, she's actually the Countess, the Joanna, and then her sister Margaret, who becomes the Countess after. For that whole century, there's no nobility, and consequently, and the French have done that purposefully. They're worried about the nobility. What they don't recognize is that the threat is not going to come from the nobility, because what lack of noble control has done is it's build these towns into such wealthy areas, and they pay for militias. So the town militias are replacing what would be a feudal retinue in the 13th century in Flanders. And the French don't have any concept. Nobody does at this point. I mean, the Italians are going to surprise well, they are starting to surprise the nobility in the countryside, as Florence and Siena and Pisa and Genoa and all these others start to be able to build, especially Milan, starts to be able to build an army out of their own citizens and mercenaries. In the county of Flanders, that's the same, and they don't even have a leader. Guy de Dampierre, who's the count, and Margaret's son, he's the Count of Flanders at that time. He surrendered in 1298 after the English left, because he's in prison, as was his as was a previous count, Ferrand, and he's in prison. So there's no count even in the county of Flanders in this period of time, and so the towns, they start getting really restless, as you pointed out,
and
really
and
restless.
and having some force of muscle on their own.
Yeah.
So let's actually kind of let's talk about that briefly if we can. What is the difference in your eyes between these militia and something that we might have seen, say with Hastings, for instance, calling out the feared and things like
Yeah.
that? How would you describe the difference between these?
Well, so I think the difference comes, especially when we're talking about urban militia versus country militia, rural militia. We do know there's rural militia. In fact, they're going to come in Flanders. They're going to make they're going to make themselves felt as a part of an active military part in the next rebellion, the rebellion that will in 1321 to 1328. But the urban militias are simply townspeople that have come together and have taken it upon themselves to do what all militias have done since way back when, since even Roman times, Greek times, and that is protect the town. They're going to protect themselves because it takes time for an army to get together, and even then, they the an army coming in is not going to protect the town within. So they there are. I mean, we see these also in northern Italy. We see that Paris is a very big militia. Even in England, with London militia is pretty fierce, but nothing that we'll see comes quite to bear in a military way as these Low Countries urban militias are, and each town has one. And we know from the records of what they've got in the arsenals that the towns have bought them the state of the art equipment So the militias are out there and they train on a weekly basis. I mean, these guys are really worried about their wealth being attacked from the outside. They're outfitted in mail. They've got, the latest helmets. They're fighting with some very interesting gear we'll get to in just a moment. What is called Goedendag becomes a
Love it.
primary weapon. But they are fighting drills. They know what they're going to do. But more important, and they have their own officers they've elected and everything else. More importantly, is they are a very strong fighting force, similar to what we'll see in Italy, but even more so in Switzerland at the end of the Middle Ages. We get these urban militias coming together, and they're the unity. Well, we call them citizen soldiers nowadays. That's precisely what they are.
So
And I
it's
don't think the French recognize their power at this point.
yeah. I mean, so a bit like here in the States anyway. Like the National Guard in a sense, but not obviously not on a national level. But this idea of yeah, they're trained, they're outfitted, they are um, have structures, all that stuff is in place. So this isn't just ring the bell and whoever can grab something. This is has a level of kind of professionalization to it. I don't want to call it a professional army. That's not what
No,
we kind of
no. I
have
mean,
here.
not,
But it
yeah.
has that sense of yeah, we got gear, we have an arsenal, like we know what we'll do, what my role is. I know who I'm reporting to. Should things happen.
And I think one of the most important things we have to point out that doesn't get brought up enough, even by people who study the urban militias in the Low Countries, is that they don't have any noble control. So there's, in the France, we talked about the militias, for example, in France and coming up in the Battle of Crecy and how they came on the battlefield late. Orleans is the one goes on the battlefield and dies. The rest of them will
Oh,
retreat. But they're at the beck and call of the king. There is not even a count in place in 1302 in the Low Countries. They are not beholden to anybody. These are town militias. They have a leadership that is only town militias, and they only will go out when those leaders, local leaders in the towns, call them to. They haven't gone out on a national battle for over 100 years in this way. So no, they're an unknown aspect of warfare, and the French kings don't really think they're much. In fact, the Battle of Courtrai, they even call them farmers and peasants, which means, now that may be a topos, oh, look at those peasants over there, look at the farmers, because they're actually in better equipment than your
yeah,
infantry is in, dude. But I think it's the same thing. There's not a concept that the townspeople can produce these citizen soldiers. And yet, what is it? This goes all the way back to ancient Greece. This is precisely the soldiers that are good.
yeah, yeah. No, there definitely is a central motif, if you will, to this battle. Is this disrespect from the quote unquote elite, right? The
Yeah,
the fighting elite. That well, these just regular folk. Like these people don't count,
they
and
don't
uh,
count.
and
Yeah,
and and quite to the contrary, they counted.
yeah, yeah.
So
No, in
before
fact,
we
they
get to
they say write them over. I mean, this is
yeah,
they don't even count in their mind. It later on in after the Battle of Courtrai, so later on when they're a little bit better, they have a little more knowledge of these. In the Battle of Cassel, there's a real reluctance to kill anybody because the French recognize, wait a sec, these are a tax base. If we knock off the Flemings here, we don't get any cloth taxes either. So that doesn't help. But at this point in time, yeah, they're looking over and saying, "Oh, those farmers over there, let's just go write them down." That's the
yeah,
French nobility, and the French nobility is there in force at the Battle of
yeah.
Courtrai too.
Now they come in force. I mean, again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves too far. This battle happens again over taxation, essentially. No taxation without a representation. Woo! That there was a bit of a quasi civil war, sort of dispute
Yeah,
over who's going to again have control in the Low Countries,
yeah,
and in particular, an effort being made by the French administration to um, codify this control and really kind of clamp down. And we're going to get the tax money. We're going to have control. And not everybody liked that.
No.
and you got a split in the Low Countries into essentially two groups. And I'm going to let Kelly pronounce the names of the two groups because I always booger it up.
Yeah.
Kelly, what are our two groups?
Well, we have the what was it, Liliard,
Liliard, yeah, they
that
support the French
those
Lily.
who
They,
support the Lily,
yeah,
and the Leopard, those who
Leopard.
support the lion, because the County of Flanders symbol is a raging lion.
There you
And in fact,
go.
so the Flemings in we'll get to how this starts because it's before Courtrai. The Flemings at the very beginning will march through the towns up through Bruges. The bourgeois will march, and they will say, "Up with the lion, down with the lily." So Leovards, Lilibards.
Yeah.
And of course, in their mind too, yeah, they had a raging lion. What did the French have? A flower. So there is a
This,
derision of this.
this
As
is like, it's
yeah,
destined.
it's
It's destined. And these people were not happy with each other. We had a lot of fighting. And a particular event happens in 1302.
yeah. Well, and see,
Uh
this is part of this. I mean, getting back to what you just said, this is part of this economic sovereignty. Because it's not a political sovereignty. The Low Countries people don't really care that the King of France is technically over them. In fact, they've got much more connection with Brabant, which is Holy Roman Empire controlled technically, but they don't really do much about it. Or Liège, which is the control of the Prince Bishop of Liège and the town of Tournai. I mean, there's they really don't care politically. There's no political ideology. It's they want to keep as much money as they can, and the French want to take as much
want
money
to
as
take as much
they
as they can. This is this is an old story.
and it is, and the French think that the way to do it, like all big bullies in this, or monarchies, we could call them at the same time. There's pretty much the terms are the same. But the French think, okay, we'll send an armed force,
Yeah.
and we're going to send it up to Bruges
Yeah.
because that is now it's not the largest city again, but they had mostly Bruges since Guy de Lapierre had been captured. I mean, his fortress was and fortification was in Ghent. But since he'd been captured, Bruges, the bourgeois had been the most vocal against the French. So the French say, yeah, the king, Philip the Fair, Philip IV, sets up a group of so he sends up a group of soldiers that are um, that go into Bruges, and they make the camps, they take over houses, they do whatever they can. They're under the control of Pierre Flotte, um, who's the accountant. He sent them up under the control of a noble accountant, Pierre Flotte. They've got
Not cool.
they've got others with them. But yeah, it's essentially a force that's led by an accountant, and
And
because
the
they don't think,
people don't like this force being here. You
well,
know,
they don't like
we're
but they also, the French think are brutal. They've got weapons. It's kind of the threat they've got is that they can do damage, they can do violence, and the Flemings can't. Except the Flemings can.
except you get enough people angry. You get enough people angry, they'll do something.
And
Uh
they got the keys to the garrison, they got keys to the arsenal, and there's tons of different weapons in there, tons
oh
of
my
and armor
goodness.
and all sorts of things. And oh, by the way, the French have to sleep, especially after drinking a lot of Creek, I'm sure.
After having a lot of a lot of something. Yes, everybody gets drunk at a big party. And
Yeah,
here
and
comes the
while
crew.
they're sleeping,
Yeah, and while they're asleep, they massacre the people. The lions massacre the lilies to a number of what 2,000 people die
yeah, well,
ultimately.
I mean, the estimations are different. We don't have a roll with the
Yeah,
numbers that are up there. Whoever it is, there's very few that get away. Pierre Flotte does. I guess as an accountant, he knows how to get out of things. He's not going to fight at all, so
I'm
he
just
runs
good with
away.
numbers, man.
He goes, he gets on the first train to first train to Paris it's like, guess what?
Yeah, and
This is called
Chatillon
the
got out.
Matins, the morning of the morning of Bruges, the Matins of Bruges.
The Matins of
Um,
Bruges, an
yeah,
absolute massacre. And look,
absolute massacre.
it's
Yeah.
not good. Like, this is
Oh,
not
the
a good
Flemings
thing,
think it's perfectly fine.
but they're very excited about this. So
They're
the
very excited
lion
about
has roared, and very quickly things, not surprisingly, devolve.
it. Yeah,
Because of course the French response to this is obviously, how dare you? This is horrific.
yeah.
Whereas the lions are all very pumped about this.
Yeah.
Um, very pumped about this. Hey, did you hear what they did in Bruges? We should do that
Yeah.
here. Like, let's this is they got it figured out. We got to start doing this. And you get a general uprising.
Yeah, it is a general, but all except for Ghent. The Ghentinnars have this problem with the bourgeois. They've had that since probably the two little tiny towns began back in the very early Middle Ages. They've had a competition. So as this is a Bruges initiated one, Ghent will not. Ghent
Or
doesn't come, which is so. There's the largest population, but
yeah,
Ypres and all these Dornick and all these little tiny towns will come, and they all come down to go after the nearest French garrison, which is in a castle in Courtrai, and that's it. And the Flemings, they know that there's going to be an answer. So this
yeah,
isn't the bourgeois don't just sit back and say, okay, well, we've done it now. That's it. French gone.
yeah. They
They
know they're
know
coming.
there's a disaster. So all these towns immediately start putting their Oudenarde has a group. Everybody has some townspeople. The largest group coming out of Bruges, and they get into these urban militias. All get their
Yeah.
um, their kit on, their mail armor, their helmets, um, everything they know they're going to fight, and they all go down to besiege this uh, very small garrison in Courtrai in the town.
Because it's one
Um,
of the only places that held out. I mean,
yeah,
everything,
yeah, yeah,
the French pull back in a panic within like a month and a half.
yeah. A month
It's
and a half,
basically,
everybody's gone.
yeah,
They're all the way
Courtrai
down.
can, I think
Yeah.
Cassel held out too, didn't it? I
No,
think.
well, Castells doesn't have a big garrison, so it may not have had. I mean, it had a small garrison. It held
Yeah.
out. I mean, there's some interesting things. We'll do the
Yeah.
Battle of Cassel, the two
Yeah.
battles of Cassel, in
But
sometime.
ultimately everybody else had fallen. Yeah. And so
Yeah,
all
I
this
mean,
is coming really down to bear on Courtrai. This is where, you know, the and the French know that's their next target. That's what they're trying to take. Like, this is going to be where the action is going to be.
it's hard to know. I mean, because we don't know the leadership at this point. Now, within days of them arriving at Courtrai, the sons and a grandson of Guy de Dampierre come to them and say, we'll join you. They're so anxious about their father being imprisoned, and they're all nobles out in the other countries. I mean, it's Keenan Namur, who is from Namur, although that would be more in French lands at this point. There's also William of Jülich, which is an eastern Low Countries province. So
And
they
he's the
all come.
grandson. He's the
He's the
grandson of
grandson.
the count.
Yeah, he's the grandson, and he seems to have a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of acumen. Although the leadership on the battlefield um, is probably by the older brothers or his uncles. They come, and the Flemings, recognizing that they need some central organization, actually accept them as their leaders. They have a modicum of experience in actual fighting, although they had not fought in any most recent things. In most recent Flemish French battles in 1297, 1298, at least we don't know. So, but they have a little bit more training, and they have some technical knowledge, or, and it's that tactical knowledge that is needed. So they are able to muster the Flemings and to recognize the presence of that area of a lot of different a good place to fight,
Yeah.
and they know the French are going to come. It's a good place to fight. Could they have advanced down on Tournai, which was still a very large and a very pro-French town, or gone down to Lille or Saint-Omer? Those would have been the other choices. They do. Um, there are groups that come from out in the countrysides around there, join the Flemings, but it seems that this is as soon as the grandson get there, they recognize that what they've got outside of the castle and outside of the town is a fairly good place to fight cavalry, and
And,
that's their interest.
yeah, and again, they know the French are going to be coming. The person sent in charge of the French army is Robert of Artois, who was put in charge of the French response here. It's a significant response. I mean, it's kind of a neat example of how quickly these things can be gathered up. That again, in a short period of time after that massacre in Bruges, Artois is on the move with 8,000 men.
Yeah, and I mean, numbers are always going to be a little bit different in these sort of things. We've got some really good Low Country sources, especially the Annales Gandenses, which is a monk from Ghent who is obviously very pro-Flemish, and he goes away from Ghent, even though Ghent doesn't say force, he's there. And then there's a couple of others that'll write in Flemish or the report that Giovanni Vellini gets in Italy shows that there is an interest in the economic aspects of it, because Giovanni Bellini is a representative. I mean, he writes; he's a chronicler of great renown, but he's also involved with the banking industry. So
Right.
they're very curious to see what comes out of it. And we also have to say the Pope, he really hates the French king. Boniface VIII really hates the French king because he won't do what he wants him to. Boniface says you cannot tax the churches in France without my permission, and Philip says, "Well, yes, I can," and he does, and the churches go with it. So the Pope is, if there's a religious aspect, and we do find the Pope hears of the Flemish uprising very quickly. Boniface down in Rome, and so there's a very interesting group that are watching this little
Yeah.
battle that takes place. French, of course, think they're going to roll right over them. I mean, there's various counts, just as Robert of Artois, for example. They got the Count of Brabant, the Count of Hainaut, the Constable of France, Raoul de Neil is there, Jacques Delpole, who is another one of the leaders, and even Pierre Flotte, the accountant's back up there. The Count of Luxembourg,
Yeah.
or Duke of Luxembourg, I guess it is. They're all there. So pretty much anybody. I don't think the Southern troops were there. So I don't think that
Yeah.
the
I think
nobles
so.
for the South come, but they wouldn't have been expected to join that far to the north. It's not seen as a huge problem for the French. Certainly, Philip doesn't think so.
No, I mean, but it's this is a significant force. I mean, you've got a few thousand men at arms and knights. So these kind of mounted guys in decent gear, like these are ready for war. And they look on the other side, and they see a few hundred men at arms knight kind of guys. They're like, this is not even a close to a comparison. You got all this rabble and just this small number of real quote unquote fighters versus us, the flower of France. This look at all of us in our finery. This is going to be a cakewalk. We're going
Yeah.
to just run you over.
I think the one number we know is around 600 Epois, so 600 from Ypres. The militia of Ypres is guarding the castle, make sure none of the French will come out to assist. They don't want anybody to flank it. And then but there's in the immediate before the French army actually even arrives. Um, the sons and the grandson, they will actually form the Flemings. They prepare the battlefield. Now this is I say this with hesitation because the great Jan Verbruggen, he was not certain that the discussion of digging ditches in these fields was accurate. I contend they were, if for nothing else, that this wonderful French writer a soldier who's not at the battle but writes, he fights in the war that follows. Um, Guillaume Guillard, who you
I'm
translated
gonna
for the
get
reader.
flashbacks, man.
Oh yeah, he's untrained French, and then he writes this 55,000 line
It's
poem
unbelievable.
on the history that he's been involved in, and he keeps talking about the veterans of Courtrai have nightmares of the ditches.
Yeah.
And so I kind of believe that there are ditches that were built. Now you got to understand this is a field. We're really talking. We always talk about roads, but the roads to take, um, the road to take for the French to go to the town of Courtrai, that's blocked off by the Flemings. So, and they are arrayed on a field that is normally irrigated because
Yeah.
the river runs right behind it. And the Flemish, the leadership of the Flemish army recognized the river is going to be too big to go across, and so they got to keep they actually line the Flemings up with their backs to the river. And you think about that tactic, they're
You got
not
nowhere to
entirely
go.
certain. Yeah, these young noblemen aren't entirely certain those townspeople are going to stay either. So let's put them with a river behind them so they cannot retreat. There's nowhere to go. You cannot go. And they put them in a bend of the river and literally across. So there's not even any way to go sideways.
Yeah.
Um, so they've got to take the fight on. I'm not sure that the Flemings wouldn't have taken the fight on. I think at this point that the up with the lion, down with the lily is a
Yeah.
big cry.
The die
But
has been cast, but you're right. I mean, this is, I burnt the ships. We can't go back home.
yeah,
There's nowhere to retreat
there's
here.
nowhere to retreat, and I suppose it's do or die for the Flemings. And the idea, I think it because of these various sources that we have, especially Low Country sources, that has been some digging of ditches that, combined with the irrigation ditches and the river, will fill with water. And the French know about them. We actually have an account that that Robert of Artois pays a spy for a map of the ditches on the battlefield. That's something that Jan didn't know. I found that out later on. And Jan Verbruggen didn't know that when I mentioned it to him one time. He says, "Oh, I got to rethink this then maybe," because it was the spy's name, believe it or not, Pierre Lorabelle, Pierre the Horrible.
Oh. Oh.
And he delivers the map of the ditches. So the French know them, and their horses can, of course, jump over them. So
God, I
that's
wish
one
we had
thing.
that map. Wouldn't that be
I
cool?
wish yeah, we've got the account of him buying it though.
Yeah,
That
that'd be
that's
cool.
it. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, there's ditches that are made here. I mean, why wouldn't you have? That's the other thing. Like, why wouldn't you make ditches? Because if you know that a force is coming and you've got the time,
Yeah.
you got people who can do it. Like, you build ditches. Like,
Mhm.
it's like number one rule of making a position is build ditches. Like, that's goes all the way back, y'all.
And
Not a new thing.
if you've got wet ground, it gets soggy very, very
Yeah,
quickly. And
terrific.
that's what seems to be the case. So the
So
French come.
yeah, they come, and as you alluded to earlier, we have some difference in armaments here. Not only sort of difference in social class and status and all that, but also difference in armament. Some stuff is going to be fairly common, standard, if you will. But in particular, certainly one uh, weapon that the Flemish have that's awesome
It
and
is.
and has a huge role to play here.
Right, and it's not used for a long time. It makes itself known in this battle, and
Yeah.
it is and it pretty much disappears by the end of the 14th century. We do hear about it, the rebellions in 1382 and 83 that the Gantonars put up with. Again, that they're used there, but it is, and it's got one of these names it's a staff weapon. That's all we can say. It's a weapon that is that is on a stick, pretty much a log in this case, or a big stick, and
A wooden staff, we
a
usually
wooden
say.
staff. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is called a Goedendag, which
Goeiedag.
means hello,
Hello. Good day.
and also means goodbye. So the Flemings have got this kind, and it is when there's been some interesting work coming out from Brooklyn did an article on what it was a Goeiedag, and we do have some depictions of it, and it looks like it's just a spike on the top of a big stick. And it's not a staff weapon like the halberds or any of these others.
Right.
This is one that's rather short, so it appears that the Flemish can hold it almost like a baseball bat with a spike at the end, and it can be used as a club, but then it also can be used not necessarily to stab somebody to death, but literally to grab a hold of their armor and pull them off a horse. That was easy to do. And then you can club them to death, or you can take out your trusty dagger and slice his neck, or something like this. Because there's no way the Flemings are going to take prisoners at this point. They know
Right.
that's no good.
And you can also use it, in a pinch. Let's say if you're being charged upon, you can also use this to set almost like a boar spear, to take on a charge.
Yeah.
So it's a very highly simple weapon.
No, it is a weapon. Yeah.
Easy to make, easy to, training's pretty easy. So you see this wood part, hold that part, swing or poke the other part.
Yeah.
And if something's charging at you, put the butt end against the ground and hold on tight.
And they did have spears and swords. This appears to be a weapon, and the funny thing is we don't hear about it before. We don't actually know. I have seen all the exemplars. There's one in Delft, one in Oudenarde, one in Courtrai. I've seen all the examples, and of course, only the top spear bit is left, and it's not particularly long. They're sharp, of course, and I've kind of looked over what might this come from, because it's certainly not an agricultural implement. I mean, it's not like there's, if it had 3 tines out, and we could say, well, it's the hay or anything like this. I have a suspicion, and I'm going to get it in that, this will be well, I mentioned it before, but sometime I'm going to have to put this down on paper. But I have a suspicion this is a dyer's tool. So dyeing cloth, you have to put them in big vats of very, very hot liquid, with toxic chemicals in that liquid. And you've got to be able to then lift the wool, which is heavy in its first place, now absolutely sodden with this wet dye, out of the vat and get it hung up. And this looks to me, I mean, look at all of these, you need to then have a very strong wooden shaft, with a point at the end that you can grab that cloth and bring it out of and let it drip out. So it needs
about 5 foot long. That's about the right length.
Yeah, about 5 foot long, and it wouldn't make sense otherwise, because, like I said, it's not an agricultural weapon. But if you look at the Courtrai chest, there was, or some of the illuminations of Froissart and other things like this, they'll show these, and then we do have the points. So I've one of these times I'm going to have to put it down. I just love to find somebody who says, "Yeah, I took this dyeing tool and made it into Goedendag." It's not there.
I would buy it, man. My favorite part of the weapon is just calling it hello, good day.
Yeah.
I just think that's the most marvelous thing ever.
Staff weapons do get these great names. I mean, I love the holy water sprinkler. Just supposed to be knocking somebody's blood coming out of it. It's the holy water sprinkler, or the morning star.
Oh, it's so terrible. But yes, good day.
Good day. There you go. Oh
It
man,
was not a good day on this day for
no,
the
no, but it
Lilies.
was really it really did make it after this battle, it made a big impression. In fact, Giovanni Villani writes, so proud and bold the Flemings have become through the victory at Courtrai, that one Fleming with his Goedendag would dare invite a battle against 2 French knights on horse.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Nice.
got my dying tool here, dude. I can take you on in your finery. But
Oh,
that's because the French knights don't do particularly well. I mean, that Giovanni Villani, this is the very end of his account, so he's told us this, but French knights are just dreadful here.
well, they are dreadful. And this is a prime example of something Kelly talks about a lot, which is infantry taking on a cavalry charge. And this notion, people have that just doesn't happen, or that doesn't work or whatever. And like, nope, here's the list of all the times it did work. And this is why it works. And Courtrai is right in the middle of that. Because again, on the Fleming side, you don't have the knights. You don't have that way of fighting. This is what we got. We got a bunch of people. We have relatively simple stuff. And all right, we'll take the best position we can. And now we'll start taking the charges. We're not going to go charging out at them. Let them come to us. We have a good position. Hold your position and let these horses come in on you. And that is a big ask to
It's a
make.
big ask.
It is. These are like, we're not talking like these are monstrous, but any horse is big. All right. And you have a horse coming at you. That's not good. You should get out of the way. But no, stay where you are. Whatever pointing thing you got, point it at that and start taking these charges. And hopefully, if we prepared the field with ditches, as Kelly said, probably happened. And I agree. We're going to start seeing a lot of these horses go down en route. Of course, they'll start going down, which is going to start jumbling their lines, start making it crazy, slow them down. And when they get to us, start, if you don't knock them off the horse in the initial charge, start pulling them down
Yeah.
and taking care of them on the ground.
I mean, up to this time, we're talking about the age of the horse, the 12th, 13th century, even going back to Hastings. Of course, you can see the value of a good cavalry, and the tactics of Hastings are the exact ones that are used everywhere. With just you go up, and if you can't break through the line, you retreat, and you go again and retreat, and it starts the line of infantry starts whittling down, and they'll get porous, and that's when the horses can advance. But the horses aren't, horses don't play football, despite the Budweiser commercials. They don't play football.
Obscure reference for everybody.
That's an obscure reference to go from, but always gets a good laugh in the classroom. Because horses don't actually. If you read tournament, the accounts of tournaments at this time, half the time the horses veer away from each other. They just don't
Yeah.
like, they don't like fighting. And if they get stopped, they're not going to run in through men. They're going to get stopped, and this is what happens. And once you stop the impetus of a charge, then the cavalryman has to now retreat and regroup, because even though he's on top of the guy, he's meaning higher, he can reach his sword down and everything else. I mean, if you've got a guy down below you who's clubbing at you or reaching up with a spear, or clubbing at you, trying to get you off the horse with his huyda, you want to regroup. You want to turn around, regroup, and come
Yeah.
in with another charge. Now you've got this boggy field with a lot of ditches, a lot of wetness, and the accounts keep telling us what happens is the French knights start piling into each other,
Yep.
and they start backing up. They try to get around. They can't. They don't have enough maneuverability, and now they're falling into the ditches.
And obviously when they're trying to make these maneuvers, they're trying to control their horse, which is difficult. So it's not like well, I'm free to be hacking at everybody I want. Well, I mean, you're trying to concentrate on this horse. You're having to turn your back on the enemy, not a good idea. Or you're trying to back up, which now is kind of rearing your horse, and that's gives all kinds of angles to attacks. It's a nightmare.
It's a
I mean,
nightmare.
really quickly a
Yeah,
nightmare.
and
It's a nightmare
everybody's
in a quagmire. It's
yeah.
amazing.
Even the French sources that are reporting this say it. I mean, Guillaume Guillard, who again wasn't there, but he knew people who had been veterans there, and they tell him about this. The French had infantry, and they actually sent the infantry in early, and then they get concerned that the infantry is going to push the Flemings into the water, and they're not going to have their victory. There's a lot of the similarity between this and say Nicopolis and other battles where the French knights say, "Oh, they're not going to take us. This is our victory. We're going to do it." And
Yeah.
then, yeah, the battle's over. Boom, like that. 30 minutes in, probably, and everybody is either, is there's no place to put anybody. Even if the infantry wanted to try to go in and save their horsemen at this point, there's no there's no place they could go. The
Yeah.
field in front of the Flemish lines that are still solid at this point, we know that no Fleming breaks. That's what's really interesting. So, as Mike describes, these cavalry horses coming down, the urge to stay is not a big one, and especially if it's political ideology, a little bit more with the fact that these townspeople are all reliant on their um, their economics, which they're fighting for, and that is a whole different thing than fighting for the king. You're fighting for your own, and the
Yeah.
speeches beforehand by these sons of Guy de Dampierre are all, you got to protect your families, you got to protect your
Yeah.
towns, you got to protect, and we can imagine that that's pretty much what they would have said, because the Flemings know if they die in this battle, if they lose in this battle, it's likely that their towns are going to get rolled over, and
Yeah.
even if their families are able to stay alive, they're going to have economic desperation that will follow, probably famine and other things like that. So there is an incentive for the Flemish to stay there, but they don't break. And it's probably because exactly what those noble sons had told them, and the few that are there who have dismounted next to them, they're not sitting on horses. So they're in the same position. They tell them the horses are going to stop, and you can then go after the riders. And it happens exactly like they
Yeah.
say.
Just hold, 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 hold,
Yeah.
and then you can get them. And
And
that,
you
and
get
yeah, that's what happened. And it is. This is a fast fight. We've talked about this before. Most of them usually are. We have exceptions. Brunenburg was a very long one.
yeah.
Hastings is a very long
Hastings.
one. But there's not
The
many that are.
battle that'll end this Battle of Montpellier, which we'll talk about in one of these, ends this rebellion, is very long.
A very long one, a very long one. This one's pretty typical. It's fast, and it is an absolute triumph for the Flemings. The losses are extremely lopsided by any account that we have.
Any account.
Any account. The remaining French run for it, and at that point, that's the only point where the Flemish lines break at all, in the sense that they're like, well, go get them, like start
Yeah.
trying to run them down, trying to get them in the route. And obviously, well, many die at that point too.
Yeah.
So many die getting in the back.
And they're
Um,
probably, I mean, the Flemings are probably not going too much en route anyway, because the infantry are far enough behind that they've got a real significant. And now the
yeah,
Flemings would have had to cross that
they got to go
same
around and
wet
through the road.
field. So it appears that the Flemings stay there. They go to the bodies. They finish off the French lines. I mean, there's no
Oh,
quarter given at all. And we know, I mean, the dead numbers. I mean, Robert of Artois is killed. All the Constable of France is killed. Guy of Nel is killed. Um, Pierre Float, the accountant's killed. I mean, it's
he went
so
down.
he went down.
He,
He went down with his books. All of these guys, as I said, the flower of French
the
knighthood
flower of French.
fell at Courtrai.
I mean, the losses are at least 10-1. It's a real lopsided fight,
Yeah,
and one that has these fascinating repercussions, because yeah, this is sort of the common folk against the noble elite. I mean, obviously, as Kelly said, there are some small number of nobles on the Flemish side and such, but you can see how it quickly gets kind of spun in this way, that this is, we're the common people, the underdog here, and we took out the big people. We took out the great guys there. It's infantry versus cavalry, It's, poor versus the rich. Like all kinds of spin gets put to this, but it also has like real world ramifications. The fact that like the the French king just lost a bunch of dudes, and he now has an issue of like, well, how well is my fighting force? In the middle of all the deals, I'm all my struggles against England. What position does that put me in? So there's geopolitical ramifications of this, even beyond just the kind of Flanders French axis. In light of this event, and there's even, as Kelly said, Giovanni Villani, and they're caring about this down south, because what does this say about the power of the French? What does it say about where our money should be? Where are the best investments? It has all these amazing ramifications, all because of what
Yeah,
happens in this
it's.
battle.
I mean, the strange thing about these is how much it is. I don't know what's going on, Mike. Good lord, I thought I'd cut all that off. Maybe they can edit that out. Those little beeps in there. The amazing thing about Courtrai is how important it is at that moment. And and we know that it's still a national holiday in Belgium. That's when I was there at the 700th anniversary. It was just amazing. The Flemings still are so very impressed by this battle. The fact is they won here and they won in World War One. Otherwise, there's not a lot of Belgian victories over big name forces. But the the fact is that it's not just Giovanni Villani who's hearing about it and writing about it. The Pope gets news that the Flemings have won, and he immediately puts out a new decree that the French king can't tax the churches. So he hears about it and takes advantage of it. What I find very interesting is that we start seeing in accounts, so the accounts of Bannockburn, for example, says this is the Scots knew the victory of
Yeah.
Courtrai, and they fought the English in that way. And there's other accounts down in Austria that say this, in Austria and Switzerland that say the same thing. That the townspeople down there have heard the way the Flemings fought, and they fight this directional way too.
Word
And
gets
the
around.
little tiny armies, yeah, start using it, and the English then respond by dismounting and starting to fight it on as infantry soldiers as well. So there's it's got this very huge importance.
Yeah. And it gets called the Battle of Golden Spurs to bring things full. This is like, I call it the Battle of Golden Spurs because it's just such a cool name. It's called that because after the battle, they went out and collected the spurs from all the cavalry that they'd taken out, and 500 pairs of spurs are collected.
500 to 600 collected, yeah.
And they're golden on account of being rich.
Well, they're awards. So not every knight is given a golden spur. They are girded with sword, of course. That's the
Yeah.
thing. These at this point, and it seems only the French are doing it, are giving them to the knights. Either they've won tournaments or they've done well. It's kind of like a somebody with a football helmet that has a sticker on it from having done really really well.
They're probably not made literally of gold, because that would not be a very effective spur.
No, they're either gilded or they're in bronze.
Just let people know. Don't use a gold spur.
No,
It's
no.
just gonna bend. But
The horse starts laughing after a while when you
what are you doing? What are you doing?
yeah.
So yeah, 500, or maybe even as many as 600 pairs of these spurs are taken. They are all put into a church.
Yeah.
That's just the most wonderful thing. In Courtrai,
Yeah.
the Church of Our Lady,
Church of Our
and
Lady, main church.
they're hung off the ceiling like stars, like
Yeah.
just the stars up there, except
All
they're all
around.
these spurs. Now, unfortunately, they got taken back
80 years later. 80
yeah, they got
years.
taken back in 1382 after the Battle of Rusbeck.
Rosbeck, yeah.
Yeah, Rosbeck.
Yeah, and that's funny because that's the battle where the Gentinars are the primary ones. They haven't participated in Courtrai, but almost the right after the victory at Rosbeck, it says that the French went purposefully to the town of Courtrai to take their spurs
We're
back.
going to take those back. Man, fortunately for all of us today, if you were to go to Courtrai, which you should, it is an
It
awesome,
is awesome.
awesome town. You can go to the church, and they have put spurs back up.
Yeah, not 500, unfortunately, but they've
Not
got a
as
few
many.
up there. Yeah, they do. And the church is still there. They've done some archaeology around it. They can see that there was a wall around the church that probably was part of the castle wall. But with the symbol of having golden spurs hung from the ceiling for 80 years in Courtrai. And they still, boy, do they ever still say, that's still the Battle of Golden
Yeah.
Spurs. And
Oh, we love it.
yeah,
We love
there's
it.
a
Now,
huge monument on Bob probably was part of the battlefield. Unfortunately, the battlefield is all developed. It's all houses now. But
yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna say this is unfortunately not like Crécy or Agincourt, these ones where we can sort
yeah,
of really reconstruct the battle pretty easily because not easily, I should say, but reasonably, because the terrain hasn't changed a lot. This one, the town is overrun where the battle was.
yeah.
So yeah,
And
there's
Jan Verbruggen it did what you do on a battle. He went back to the old maps and looked at it, and he's got a pretty good idea where they were. Even the monastery that was on one side has been moved to the middle of town, but we could see where that monastery was, the Abbey of Groningen, and that is on the one side. And then the castle on the other. So Jan Verbruggen was able to really figure out where the battlefield was, even though we can't actually, see any of the remnants of it. It'd be
yeah,
nice to see if it was. I was there one time when I swear I saw what might have been a ditch from the battlefield. I'm sure it was just me wanting to find one. But it's a beautiful little town, and it certainly loves this part of its history.
yeah.
And through a huge event for the 700th anniversary, and I was lucky to be there. And
Treated Kelly like royalty.
they did. They found I was there. Suddenly, I'm brought up big archaeology discussion in the church of the. I was actually in the Church of Our Lady, and heard this discussion. It was given in Flemish, and it was wonderful. And I was sitting next to the French ambassador, who mentioned to me very, very forcefully, because the Belgians had actually not sent anybody. They were worried about their European Union ideas. But the French had sent their ambassador, and he had to remind me at least twice that this was the only time the Flemings beat the French. So he was okay to be there because overall the Flemings hadn't done. But it is. It's hard. This is the underdog. This is what we always want to see happen. And the fact that it's the French is also, the big bully on the block is getting kicked by the little, it's Goliath being fought by David in this case. And note that, by the way, is mentioned too. David Goliath comparison.
Oh, frequently, frequently. So yeah, it's a cool battle. It's an awesome one, and yeah, so we're they're gonna turn off the lights on us here pretty soon, man. But I am curious, what what do you wish you knew for sure about this battle that we don't know?
Yeah,
What thing that we're missing do you wish we had?
this is one of the battles. I mean, I'm very open in saying I wouldn't like to see the bloodshed of any of these medieval battles we
Oh
talk
God, no.
about. This one I kind of would like to be, kind of overlooking the thing and seeing exactly how it happened. Um, I'd love to have. We've got really good sources for it. That's perfect. More than we do for a lot of battles. So I think what I'd love to have is more archaeology, because the
Mm,
battlefield has been developed. We're never going to get that. It would be nice to absolutely determine that there were ditches that were dug and that there were personal. All the bodies are moved to the monastery until the French bring the nobles back. So there's no grave mounds to be found or anything like this. But it'd be nice to find some more artifacts and to locate the battle exactly where it was. But they've done fairly well. This is one of the battles where I think we've got more information than we need to tell the story, and so we do. We can tell it very well. There's some
mm.
small arguments here and there, but we can tell it very well. What about yourself?
it would be the map of the what they're facing. What is the intel the French had? I mean, what happens to the French is to me like one of these like, okay, but what did you think you were facing, right? What was the intel that you had that made you think this was going to work? I want that intel. I want to know what it was that Robert d'Artois sort of had in front of him and thought, okay, well, this is going to work, because it didn't. So it'd be really nice to know, like, okay, what intel did you actually have when you did this? So how much this is an intel failure? How much of it is a failure of pride? How much is it a failure? Like exactly how do I apportion the blame, as it were? And I'm not that to take anything away from the courage and all the awesomeness that happens on the other side, which you don't want to, but I also just would really like to know, how does this go so bad from an execution standpoint on the French side? And a lot of that, one of the major components of that is just going to be like, what did they know? What did he know going in? So that's what I wish I knew, man.
That we have this knowledge that we have this account where he pays for the map of the ditches.
Yeah,
That certainly tells us that he's preparing. I think this is a case, and we talked
I
about
want
this
that
with
map. I want that map.
Tracy. You
I
want that
want that
map?
map. I want that
That
map.
would be fun. That would be fun. Maybe that's it. Who knows if it was kept by Robert Artois, he dies in the battle. It is
Yeah,
interesting that from this time forward, so it's his grandson, then later will become real allies with the English. So Robert
absolutely.
Artois in 1340 is the grandson, and he's in simpatico with he's one of the chief generals that Edward III uses in the Low Countries for years. So I kind of wonder if the family goes, "Damn, we didn't do well with the French. Let's just run on the other side." But to me, I think this is an example we talked about with Crazy. The first time somebody sees something new and they're never trained for it. The French army is not trained for urban militias to face them, and urban militias that know that have something to fight for. There's no ideology. There's no king saying you've got to go here. No count saying you've got to do this. It's just they are there to save their families, and that makes a lot of difference. And to save their lands, save their livelihood. And economic sovereignty means so much more than
Yeah,
political sovereignty does at any time. It just doesn't. We don't see it often. But I think that's the sticker here. And the French have nobody has seen this. This is why Courtrai becomes a name that will be known in Scotland, that will be known in Switzerland, that will be known in Italy, because nobody has seen urban militias face down an extremely powerful French army.
yeah.
Up with the lion, down with the lily.
I want the Lily.
And
Well,
in a couple of months, we'll have to come visit Mons Pavel, where the French get their revenge, and then this.
yeah.
The Flemings will have a little bit of time. They will do fairly well for 2 years.
Well, there you go, folks. I hope y'all enjoyed it as much as we did. But they're gonna lock the doors on us, so we got to get out of here. So look, please do join us next time when we'll be talking about the Battle of Zonchio. And as ever, a reminder: this podcast is sponsored by medievalist.net. So the best way to support us, other than buying our books, is to join their Patreon at patreon.com/medievalists. And that's also a great place, an awesome place to drop us a line if you have questions for our Q&As, which again, that's coming up the next episode after the next one, 2 episodes away. That's what it's going to be. So get those to us. Otherwise, be safe out there, everybody.
Naval warfare in the age of the gun. That's our next one.
There we go. It's going to be good times.
1499.
All right. Cheers,
All
everybody.
right. One last sip. One last sip of Creek.